You know, the more and more I read this book, the less I am really surprised by what sort of Kwasi and Liz Truss are sort of putting forward, because it's all in here. It's in their exact everything that they have done so far is in here, and to be honest, as they have said on a number of occasions, they haven't even finished yet. And some of the stuff in here, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. But yeah, that's for another time. That is certainly for another time. I've still got to sort of get my head around it and figure just how exactly I'm going to cover it. So yeah, it's interesting to say the least. Ooh. But a report has recently been released, and to be honest, this shouldn't surprise a lot of people, because it says it in here. Apparently, back in 2016, Kwasi Kwarteng has been reported to have said that after Brexit, he doesn't care if the pound crashes. Now, why is that the case? Well, for a number of times, we have heard about zombie companies, and unsurprisingly, it is all about these zombie companies that are, at least as they perceive, zombie companies. And their idea is that this is like the ultimate slash and burn move. You may have heard about this whole idea of you go into sort of a forest, you completely slash and burn it all down, but in the long term, it's actually somehow good for the forest because all the sort of the ash and the stuff in the that gets burnt from the trees goes into the soil, makes the sort of the forest regrow stronger. This is what I think they are at least trying to do. So all this run on the pound, the fact that we've had since Friday a lot of economic woes, and almost every single day we have had news about how bad the pound is doing, how bad the market's reacting to do it. But before we just get into this, we're going to go over what the report said and what this really means to the UK economy, because this is indeed quite worrying. But before we do get into that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and our affiliation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way, even if you do just hit the like and share button. So, like I say, this was in the London Economic, covering this report. So, this comes from apparently a claim from a Londoner backbencher. So this is what it had to say. Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng reportedly said, "Who cares if the sterling crashes after the Brexit referendum result in 2016? The then Tory backbencher, who backed the Leave campaign, was heard making this remark outside the Groucho Club in Soho, according to the Evening Standard. Joy Leldilko, the journalist behind the Londoner Diary column at the time, said that she found Mr. Kwarteng talking feverishly into his phone after the result, saying, 'The markets are going mad,' he told her. The Brexiteer was later heard saying, 'Who cares if the sterling crashes? It will come back up again.'" So here you have a chancellor who does not care if the pound crashes. Now, I have to remind people that all those Brexiteers, including, Kwasi, were chomping at the bit for Brexit. And economically, they always said, "Oh, we're going to be fine after Brexit. Don't worry about the doomsayers. We're going to be fine." But here's the thing. People who have the money and the investments were going to be fine. Your average Joe on the street, they're probably not going to be fine. Because what happens if the pound crashes? Well, first of all, this opens up the UK to literally be picked apart by vulture capitalism and opens up to a lot of disaster capitalism. Because you've probably heard a lot of these Brexiteers say things like, it doesn't matter if the pound crashes or we have economic woes, or we are doing this because it will be a good thing because it gets rid of zombie companies. But what is a zombie company? And there are terms and definitions, but the thing is, because you've got to look at the term they're using for zombie companies, and it's in here. So, what is a zombie company according to them? Well, a zombie company, according to them, is a company who is limping on, but somehow surviving because of low interest rates, government support, regulations, and basically a company who is reluctant to even innovate or do things like that. But I find it kind of weird because their version of a zombie company can go from anything to a big multi-international down to sort of an SME with between, again, 10 to 250 employees to, well, a micro company. Uh, you know, um, so it's kind of insane that they would sort of brand a lot of companies like this because I've said this before on our channel that SMEs are about 99.9% part of like the business infrastructure here in the UK. Like most people who are employed in the sort of your town area or city aren't employed by big multinational companies. Now, some places it is. Let's not make that mistake. And there are big companies dotted here and about and everywhere throughout, all the UK. But most people don't work for big internationals. They tend to work for these small SMEs who, again, between like, the 10 to 250 employee mark. And they brand a lot of those companies zombie companies because they're somehow surviving and not innovating. But rather than blaming the business environment, which even they say in the book, they say that the UK business environment is a perfect one, and they can't understand why there isn't more growth and productivity in the UK market, and they instead blame sort of like workers' rights regulation again, infamously the infamous quote calling British workers the laziest in the world because they're protected by workers' rights and etc. etc. So make no mistake, their definition is vastly different from the other from the other definition that exists out there of like a zombie company. And I think they do intend to generally seriously crash the economy. Because in their crazy addled ideological mind, that's fine. Because as far as you've just heard it there, oh, don't worry, it'll come back up. Why? Because a load of like vulture capitalists will just swoop in and start picking apart UK companies. That would literally mean jobs going to Europe, America, or where else these vulture capitalists come in. They won't care about the UK worker, and they're so convinced that if they do this, these new unicorn companies will spring up and become like the new Apple or whatever. But that's not how most of those companies started to begin with. And when you've got, as I said, it should make no mistake, 99.9% of our UK business infrastructure is based around SMEs. And yet this is the type of company Kersey and sort of the rest of these libertarian free market fundamentalists claim they care about, but really don't. Because if you haven't had, I think, year on year, growth, you're branded as a zombie company. I generally can't believe we're in this state. I generally can't, but that's the unfortunate state we are in. And I really do worry where we're going to end up next. It's going to be a wild ride. I can tell you that. It's not going to be fun, but it's going to be a wild ride. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.